Alright, hi guys, this is Andrew from create3dcharacters.com and we're going to go through some of the new Redshift releases. Two things in particular, the camera update, and we've also got the scrubbing in the timeline, and we've also got the denoisers. So this is all really rad, cool stuff. Redshift, this is smokingly good tech, cutting edge. So let's get started here, and we can just see we've got Nat here in a scene just with two area lights. So this is a super stock standard basic setup. This is fresh, clean. So let's just change a couple of things here in Redshift, and we're just going to switch GI on. So we're going to have bounce passes. Of course, we want bounce passes, so we're just going to have 3. Why not? Brute force it. Let's go. So now we can hit play, and we are IPR moding there. So first thing is the update. Don't mind my machine in the background there. I've overclocked the CPU. It just sort of hums a bit. But we've got here the responsivity of Redshift now, so check that out. Really lovely, nice and fast IPR, very quick. On such a simple scene like this, look at that, there's no denoiser, that's just instant clean. Really, really nice. This has a turntable on it, so we can scrub here. Now, when you scrub, make sure you're in the right window. So we just got to click on that window in the background there, that's this guy, just to make sure it's current, and now we can scrub around. And you can see how fast that is. I do have 4 GPUs in this machine. There's 2 1080s, 2 1070s. And probably I'd recommend just going 4 1070s. The 1080s don't really give me much extra gain. So you can see that that's all updating nicely. Couple of things. If we come in here, we've got the undersampling. It's at 0 currently, so the default is 2. So the default looks like this. Now the difference between this is if we go all the way to 3, we've got some chunky pixels there, so that's faster for your frame update. It's kind of nicer when you're kind of like navigating around the viewport. So if you're navigating in here, having those chunky pixels can feel more responsive. So that's good, but in a demo like this, putting that down to 0 is probably going to be a little bit better because you don't get those chunky pixels and everything looks nice, and such a simple scene, it's updating quick anyway. So there you go, that's the update speeds of that. Of course, everything is interactive, so we've got this light here doing different things. That's the fill. You can make that big, soft, scaling it up and down, scale this one down. You know, beautiful real-time shadows, however you want them. That sort of stuff, big, soft fill, if you want. Sorry, key, soft lighting for girls. It's all there. So there's a few other things that we can do here. One of those is in the asset manager that I've got here with Zootools. This is part of our tool set, and this will be getting bigger and bigger, but at the moment we've got a whole bunch of stuff. You can come in and instantly make background and lights. So these are presets, light presets, kind of scene presets in a way, and what that's just done is it's deleted all the lights in the scene and it's recreated it with a couple of cool simple little assets like a background cyc and a stand. And then we've just got a light setup. So these are sort of like bundles. I'll probably call them not assets in the future. I'll call them zoo bundles. And bundles of assets. So you can see that that light has changed. And this is all real time. It's not edited. So we are just literally toggling through different light setups to find the ones that we like. Right, so we've got this dark soft gray one. These are IBLs that are working too. So to prove that I've got IBLs in the scene, let's just come down here, type in hero, and we're going to come down into the watch. Why don't we? So this is just, what it does is it replaces things of the same type. So this is a hero, so it's replacing that now onto this watch asset, which by the way, down here, you can see that this is a model by Chavez and it's free. So you can grab it from there if you pause the video and you can type that in. On Archive 3D, I believe you can just look for Oris Watch on Archive 3D, you might find it, and that's pretty cool. So free asset, I just put some shaders on it, and you can come through here again, and we can just toggle through some of these light assets. So you can see that there are definitely, most certainly, some IBLs in the scene as well, and these presets will be coming soon. But you can just come in here and grab, say, that IBL there, and rotate that to show you that that's live. So pretty nice, fast stuff here for Redshift. So that's really showing the update speeds in the thing. We've also got, if I click on that watch, I have got a create turntable selected. Let's put that at 0, just hit turntable on that. And that will make the asset into a turntable, the bundle into a turntable. Now, if we middle click in that view down there, now I can scrub, see what that looks like under different lighting conditions. So really dig in this Redshift stuff. Very, very cool. Of course, we don't support just Redshift, we also support RenderMan and Arnold. So this UI will work in all 3 of those renderers. So there you go, guys. That's the scrubbing in the timeline. All right, so let's talk denoisers for Redshift now, and we'll get into, just come into render settings. They're in the render settings, just come over to output, and currently this is where it is. I suspect it will be in the interface. This is sort of an experimental release for customers. Okay, so what that means is now we can change all the settings, but most of all we've got a denoiser there, so we can just switch between Altus Denoiser and Optix. So we're going to start with Optix. Optix is Nvidia's free denoiser. It is currently optimized for iRay, so it should be improved in the future, they tell us. But it's free, and so Redshift and all the other renderers can use this one, and Redshift's one of the first ones to pop up with it fully operational. So now that we've got Optix up, we can start to play with this. So instead of demoing on the watch, which I will get to, let's come back in here to the asset manager. And we're going to come back with our hero asset. I'm going to switch that out for another one. And I've got this Styracosaurus, hope you pronounce that. And this one is original concept art by Javier Burgos, which my Spanish is terrible. But you can check out his work. He's a 2D concept artist on Chavez 81 on Instagram. And I modeled this one up and sculpted it. And you can see that here. So let's just hit go again on this guy here and rearrange these windows a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is just make this sure this guy turntables. Let's bring that in and turntable him. I'll go from -90 on this guy, and that means that he'll start sort of negatively in the timeline like that. So we can scrub through and get a turntable of this guy. If we middle click in that view there, just little, we can scrub, and so we can see this. Now, this model's pretty decent for showing just how well the denoiser works, and that's because if you blink, you will miss it. That is kicking in. Just reaffirm that this is Optix. Okay, so to test out just how fast this is, we can enable force progressive. So what this means is we're going to force our IPR mode in the actual render mode, and we're going to bring this right back down to 32 samples tops. Okay, and stop that. And now I'm just going to hit this button, and what that's going to do is going to render it pretty fast. So I'm just going to bring up the script editor. Currently, this is sort of all getting better and better in Redshift, but currently we need to find the times still in the script editor. This is their new render view. And you can see that just took 3 minutes 49. So let's just refresh that. Redshift can be a bit different for how the test later of the objects and what's loaded into RAM and whatnot. But so now we're getting that down to 183 seconds. And I'm just going to click on the next frame and see how fast that is and run that again. So we're at 2 seconds and 2.5 seconds. So that's 2.5 seconds. And as you can see, that's a pretty nice render. Now on YouTube, you may not notice, but that's pretty damn nice on my machine. And that's currently sitting at 720p. So let's go full HD. So I just click on that. And these are all these tools are available on create3dcharacters.com. Set resolution to 1080p. That just instantly gets us to 1080. Now we're a bit closer into that there. And let's see how fast that is. So that's now 5 seconds. Let's click on the next frame. And this is, by the way, I'm just in IPR. Shouldn't be any difference between these two. So just under 5 seconds for that frame. And you can see that's looking pretty nice and clean. So again, I'll just zoom in. So the long and short of the story on the Nvidia Optix is a little bit of stuff going on there, but that's pretty decent for a 5-second render, under 5 seconds. Optix works beautifully on very flat shaded materials, so it's going to be very, very fast. It's hardly any slower than the actual render. So if we bank that image now, just down here, bank that. So we've got it here. Let's render this again now without Optix. So we just turn that off and we can render that. And this time it's going to be rendering, 450. So it's only a tiny bit faster. To another frame just to get that, and then we'll go back, so 3 seconds. Yeah, 333. So, it's adding a second to do the thing, but I found that in some tests it's very minimal, the overhead that's on the Optix. So if we just bank that now, we can compare the quality differences and come in right in here. So you're looking at, regular at 32 samples. That is these settings here, just the passes. This is force progressive, so it's like brute force. And then we've got the denoised. So that's pretty mad cool. And it means that we can really render, you know, very, very fast renders. So we'll go down to even 16 and then bank that. So that's now 16 and, you know, 2 seconds a frame. Okay, full HD. So it's pretty noisy. Okay, zoomed in. And we can now chuck on our Optix and just see what happens and bank that. So 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds. And I believe if I'm going to bank that, and we'll just have a look at the difference between these two by stopping that, zooming in. So this is Optix with only 16 samples. And actually there's not much difference there, so I stand corrected. You may need to go up to 32. Looks like I'm brand new to this. Yeah, 32 is definitely cleaning that up. 16 is not cleaning that up much at all, so definitely 32 wants that. Now, there's a few things to remember with Optix. One of those is if you are to bucket render this, it's a good idea to come into your options, come over to your system where we've got our bucket size and put that as big as possible. So a couple of things. One is don't use buckets. So bucket, that's my first suggestion. Just brute force the whole thing. Now this is depending on what mode you want to be in, whether you want to be doing force progressive rendering, which is just brute forcing basically everything, or whether you want to be using your max and min samples. So it really depends on the scene, but a simple scene like this, probably just pure brute force is going to get you across the line faster. But if you want to actually up this to 32 and do some bucket rendering, which is the usual way of doing this with that off, do some bucket rendering. Let's just have a look at this. So what happens is for each square that it's bucket rendering and cleaning up, it is actually doing a full Optix sort of calculation. So what that means is that your renders get a lot slower. So we're looking at a 10-second time there on using the buckets. Now this can be good and bad, it depends how complex your scene is, but certainly on this scene, like 10 seconds, that's a long time. That'll almost clean up without any denoiser in that time. And what you want to do is you want to bring up these bucket sizes there as big as possible, which is the max, that's 256. So just a little issue with Optix there, that buckets is calculating every bucket. So the smaller your buckets, it's going to really make your scenes a lot slower. So this is a scene that performs really well with Optix. Let's have a look at a scene that doesn't perform quite so well. Alright, so I just put this render view aside and we'll switch back to that watch scene that I had before. So we're just going to come up here, we're just going to go hero, and I'm going to select the watch, hero watch scene, and we've got that there. Now I can make that turntable again just by clicking here. And you can see that's turntabling, but that's all ready to go. Now we can just hit render again here. And that's going to update it. Now let's have a look at some of our render settings here, see what we've got. So we're going to come over here. I'm going to turn Optix off just for this, for starters. And this is doing a little bit more work, this scene. So it's got an IBL, and the IBL has a texture on it. So we've got a little bit of variation across the watch. Now let me just come in here, and I'm going to toggle through a few of these background light setups. So we just got a little bit more variation. That's actually not too bad. I think I like those ones because it's got the stands on it, 2 stands. Alright, so here we got a HD frame. It's HD, and we've got, you know, it's taking a little bit longer to denoise now because of these textures and because of the lighting and the reflections, and this is all ray tracing. So let's just come in. By the way, enable just means that when you hit that button, it's not bucket rendering. So if we do that, it's only going to stop at 16 samples. Obviously that's going to be too noisy, so let's go again to 32 this time and render that. And we can see now that we've got a 5-second render time, and it's still got quite a lot of noise in there. Okay, so we've got noisy stuff going on. So this worked quite well in our scene scenario before with the dyno, but this time we're going to come in and see how it goes now with Optix, giving it a bit more of a challenge. So we're just sort of raising up a little bit, and we can hit go. And we've got a cleaner result. But if I'm going to bank these, and let me just redo the none. By the way, what we at is about 7 seconds for that denoise version. 7 versus 5-ish. So there's our denoise version and there's our noisy version. Now, if we come in here and have a look closely, this is all blotchy. So that means that, great, it's looking better, definitely. It's blotchy, but that's going to not be enough. So what we can do is just test this at a bit of a much higher kind of a resolution. So I'm going to try this now. At something like 128. Let's just go a lot higher. And this is still with the denoiser off. So let me let that go and we'll see how long that takes. Just editing the video for you guys, that's 17 seconds. So that's, I mean, that's a pretty impressive frame really for 17 seconds with absolutely no denoise happening. But you can see, you know, it's noisy. We got some noise in there. So now let's switch that back and make sure that's been banked. So it's over here. And I'm going to call that 17. Okay, so that's no denoiser, 128 samples, force progressive at 17 seconds. And now we want to do that and compare it with Optix. And we're just going to hit that. Okay, so we're at 19 seconds. It's at a couple of seconds for the denoiser, but that's happening very, very fast. I'm going to bank that and call this Optix. And we'll go 128, so that's still 128, force progressive, and we've got a render time of like 19.7 seconds. Okay, so we've got, you know, a difference here in quality. Now come down here and still have a look at this section. Did do some tests on this before, just quickly. Haven't tested this a lot. We've got a little bit of blotchiness there. So even though it's cleaning up that well, it's sort of washing out some stuff. And let's have a look at these sharp, clean sort of things that are going on here. So in this section of the watch, you can see it's a nice sharp sort of a line there. And it's actually not doing too bad a job. So around about here, I can see that that sharp kind of area here is actually blurring out a little bit. You can see it's definitely blurring the image slightly. We are losing some detail there. But overall, it's not too bad and it's probably preferable. Now what will happen with Optix is it just keeps getting better and better. So the longer that you up your passes, the better that Optix will start to work on your scenes. And I've only had one scene that so far, anything with very, very grainy detail may prove to be better with no Optix. But upping this is generally going to get you a better result over time, a better and better and better denoised result until basically both images will look the same. Now, the other denoiser that we have here, and this is a good scene to compare with our other engine, our other denoise engine, and this one is Altus. So let's try this one now. We can stop this. Now, Altus, first thing you got to know about Altus is it does not work with progressive, force progressive mode. So we've got to disable that completely. Now, we're going to use the render button now because this is buckets. And you could probably with Altus, because it's working on a different technology, I'm not sure about this, don't quote me, someone can leave a comment. 128, you can probably leave it that on 128, just the regular bucket size. And now the thing about Altus is it actually renders 2 frames. So if we come back to here, Altus is actually rendering 2 frames. So if you're going to render 2 frames, you definitely want to bring down your passes. Rendering 2 frames at 128 is really going to double our times of 17 seconds. And of course it's going to be cleaner if we're rendering at 34 or 50, 40 seconds. So let's go down here to 64, and I haven't tested this with our times. But we definitely want to be less now on our samples to get sort of the same times. In fact, we're actually going to be using this sort of max and min samples here because we're not using force progressive at all. So let's go 64, and usually I make this sort of the defaults is like a quarter of this one. So that's 16 in this case, just as a heads up. Now, people will probably tell me all this sampling, so I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. Let's not confuse the issue too much. You can get into a lot of, but ifs and the buts with rendering. So let's render that. Now what this is doing is you'll notice that that's still quite noisy in the renders there, but it'll render 2 passes. So it'll render one at 2 different frames at 64, and then it does a little randomization of the noise and does a little bit of extra stuff with the denoiser and compares those frames in order to give you the clean result. So let's just wait a little bit, and you'll see that Altus is not free. So what happens when this goes bing is that we can see that it puts all this lovely Innobright stuff all over there. So you can go and buy Altus. At the moment it's not super cheap, but maybe we'll get some special deal with that in the future. Anyway, even so, we can still test this out and see how it's going, and that's looking nice and clean. Now let's have a look at those render times. So those render times are quite a lot longer, 27.9 seconds. So we can bank that. and we'll call this one Altus. And this one is 16 to 64 and no force progressive on that one. So we can sort of bank that and see what we've got. So if we want to compare sort of quality between the quality of these renderers, we want to get those times kind of the same. Now I'm trying to keep it simple. So, you know, I know there's a lot of ifs and buts with this. Now, if we have a look here between the Optix, you can see already in this sort of area here, Altus is giving us a much cleaner result on that. And it's keeping that detail pretty well. Optix at 20 seconds, only adding 7 seconds. And we're getting a much cleaner result in terms of this. And I totally prefer it. Look down here into this section. You can see that it's clearly much better on the Altus. So we probably, to be fair, we want to up the Optix a little bit. So we're rendering this at 128. There's not a lot we can do but double our times here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing 128, let's do 256 and see. So this is certainly not the fairest of comparisons, but we just want to be rough with this. And we're going to go back to Optix with a double sample. So it's doing a lot more sampling. And I'll let this go and then report back to you guys. Okay, we're back with that finished. I'm going to bank that. This time we're at quite a much longer render times. The Optix, and we just got a 256 force progressive, and we've got 39 seconds, 0.9, so 40 seconds really. And now we sort of can compare the quality of these two renders. Come down here, you can see Altus and Optix. Now if we zoom right up here, you'll see that maybe this is a little bit more detailed and accurate. Maybe Altus is getting rid of the details, but I'm preferring this Altus image with less time. So you can see there's a little bit of grain in the Optix still, and Altus, that is beautiful and clean. Let's have a look around. This sort of section's always going to be tricky, and you can see that's, you know, there's a bit of naff stuff going on there. So for a quicker render in this one, Altus wins. Okay, but with Altus, it has to do 2 frames. You're not going to get those ultra quick render times. There's just no way around it, and it's not really, maybe it's worth it. I think Altus is generally better. But I think on a 2 second, if you're looking for an under 5 second render time, like I do for animation, then I think Optix wins in the animation example for simple scenes. But if you're looking for a better quality overall render time, I think Altus is going to win most of the time. And from what people tell me, it's much better. It's production, it's proper. There's a lot more math that's going involved in that. Of course, the advantage of Optix is you're seeing it as you progressively render, better full look dev. Whereas Altus has to render 2 frames. So if you've got a heavy scene, you've got to wait until the end until it gets denoised, whereas Optix will clean consistently as you go. So Optix is more of a look dev tool. Altus is more of a production, final quality render tool. Optix is expensive at the moment, and Optix is free. So Optix is probably the one we're going to be excited about, but I think Altus is definitely the way to go in Redshift, since it's got those really lovely sort of production values. If you've got a client and, you know, you're paying for stuff, then just, you know, throw Altus $100 their way for a 3-month license, and you're going to be good. That price is supposed to come down for Redshift users in the future. Maybe, big question mark. Okay, so after we've done those tests, now we'll do finally this last test, and we'll show that these denoisers do not work in every situation. Alright guys, so just an introduction into this scene. This is more of a scene with textures. I don't have a lot of these hanging around, even though I do teach a fair bit of this realistic lighting stuff. Let's just have a look at this. We just press go on this. I'll show you the settings over here. Okay, sorry, I just had to fix that up a little bit. So here it is rendering away. We got brute force and just 2 GI bounces. Keep it nice and low. And then we just got pretty much stock everything else. So one thing that we're really testing here is the passes here. So I'm going to lower these and go down to between 256 and 512 so that they max out. We'll force enable this so that it doesn't bucket mode. We just get the pure brute force of this scene, which is an interior with one directional light and just a portal and IBL coming through onto that glass. Don't worry about my glass setup there. I realize I haven't set that water up correctly. This is just a real quick bash scene that is sort of a work in progress. So let's do some comparisons here with the denoiser. Particularly, I know that there is some issues regarding this texture in the background, which will give us some difficulty on the denoisers here. And just to mention, this is a scene based on a photograph, so I will send you guys the credits for the original photograph for that. Okay, so here are the results from some quick testing in Redshift. So I'll just go through the settings here. We've got brute force and brute force. Number of GI bounces, just 2 I did for this test. Otherwise, it's pretty stock defaults. And then we're just coming back over to here, and we're either, if it's got FP down here on the name, so I'll go through these, that just means the force progressive is on, so it's just doing pure brute force, in other words. Now with Altus, it cannot do pure brute force, and so we're just mitigating, changing these two numbers to do the bucket render mode for Altus to get the results there. So let's start with this guy down here. This is the first sort of version of a pure render, and this one took 46 seconds on the 4 GPUs. So 46 seconds, and we're getting a pretty nice result, really. I mean, in YouTube, you will see, it's difficult to see, but I'll zoom in. There is some noise in this render at 256 samples as a limit, so that's basically 256 on force enable, and with no denoise. So there's a little bit of noise, of course. What we really do want to have a look at here is maintaining this textural detail in the background texture there. It has a bump map on it, is affected by the lighting. Now if we come across to Optix at that same level, so this is just simply going now Optix on and then rendering those same settings, we get this sort of a result. So if we go down here in the sort of graining area, you can see, yeah, it's making that less grainy. It's not particularly clean down here. Not particularly clean. It's blurring out probably a little bit too much, but that's certainly, for a low result, it's getting better. Really the main issue with this is this big area here, and you can see there's a really huge difference where it's just blurring the hell out of this subtle detail on the textures. So that is the settings. We're also going a little bit longer. It's going at 50 seconds rather than the 46. So that's a big fail. Now, Altus being a more of a quality denoiser, you'd think that it would be doing a better job, and it does a little bit, but already here in this version, and we can have a look down this bottom corner, this is a render. Now we're sort of turning that off, and we're going from 32 here to 128, okay, on the Altus, because we want to go a little bit less than that, and it's rendering twice and then doing the denoiser, so it's going to take a little bit longer. In this case, it ends up being 1 minute and 25, so 50 seconds, 46 seconds, 1 minute 25. It's quite a bit longer on the render times on that one. And you can see in this area down here, especially with the wood, that's a big improvement over this one. Okay, so it is definitely working on the wood here quite nicely. But you'll notice here, unfortunately, again, we're really getting rid of all this nice detail here, and it's getting blotchy. And I would imagine on rendered frames that's going to flicker on and off. I mean, we're completely losing quite clear detail that's in that wall there, even with the Altus. So it's not perfect on that one. And if we were to zoom back, it's difficult for you guys to see at home on YouTube, compressed videos, but that to me is a much more preferable result than that one overall, with all the blurring of that detail. Despite the fact that we've got a bit of noise there, it's okay to have noise in your renders a little bit. You're not going to notice it looks a little bit like any sort of noise, and with compression on YouTube, if you are uploading to YouTube, or even just a little bit of MPEG compression will sort of get rid of that. So this one, on that case, the no denoiser wins. And this even goes for higher settings, so I doubled everything, so we're at 512. So now you can see down at 512 here, still we have some noise, even at 512 with no denoiser. And we're at, the render time's getting much longer, 1 minute 31, force progressive, so there is no sort of sampling stuff going on here. We aren't doing irradiance. There's lots of ways of getting this render faster, but just for the pure sake of denoiser, that is looking very, very, very nice from at 100% sort of level. But we come across to this guy here, which is the Optix at the same, and we're getting really bad loss of detail on those guys there. So that's no good. That's destroying this image. And if we come across to Altus, this is a much longer render time. We're now at 2 minutes 21, so almost a minute longer. And we still haven't got rid of this kind of loss of detail in here around these guys. It's still denoising that and losing that nice fine detail in that texture. I can see that clearly on my monitor. You can clearly see lines going through there, but on the Altus one, it just sort of erases them and gets a bit blotchy. So on this image, no noise is right. So it just really depends on the image. And even down here, it's doing a wonderful job of that wood. So potentially you could do things in comp. At the moment, this is all pretty much a one-off built into Redshift, but I imagine later on it'll be able to save out multiple passes and things like that, and you'll be able to use the noise on that material, but not on that. Might get a lot better if you think about it like that. But so there you go, guys. That's a good run over of the some of the pros and weaknesses of these denoisers. Very, very handy stuff, unless you got these sort of case scenarios where you really need that fine textural detail. I'm really excited to be using these, especially with the simpler render stuff. It's going to be really, really nice.